Hi guys, this is Cindy
And Michael?
from Part-Time Permies, and I remember to wait for Mike to say his name before I said Part-Time Permies today. Welcome. We have a number of new people in the room, so welcome to the room. In Part-Time Permies chat, we do a number of discussions, and I'm actually adjusting the screen slightly because I'd like to see how many people are in the room, but the way it's set up, I cannot yet. So let me just make that, there we go. So we have a number of things to go over. We got a couple of videos out this week, so we'll just touch briefly on those. And then we have a forage food that we tend to feature every week, so we'll go through that as well. Oh, your mom says she loves the pipe
She would
piano.
have gone crazy if she got to see that. I was thinking about
Yeah,
that when we were there.
I posted the picture in the live
Every
show.
every part of
The
it,
slide.
from playing it to how it works and how they made
It
it
was
and the
cool.
math on it, and
That was
yeah,
actually at our last Thursday market of the season. The husband of the market director brought in the pipe organ, little wooden pipe organ, which I can actually pull up that
yeah. I've
picture.
seen him around. They just got married.
Yeah.
I've seen him around, but I don't really know him. I guess he's an organist for a local church.
Yeah.
So he's putting this all together, and he's talking about it. I'm like, "Are you an organist?"
Yeah.
Because he wasn't. So they said this was built for them. I think it's on loan. It's on tour
It's being leased.
or
He
leased.
said
Yeah,
he's leasing it. So they're bringing
yeah,
around, and a couple of people at the market decided to try it out and play it. And this woman was singing gospel and was amazing.
yeah. And I've gotten to know her. She does traditional. It's sinfully sinfully cinnamon with C's,
Yeah.
and she's a local woman who's, I don't know. She's probably about 80, I think. Um, and she sells out with some of the other markets. So I've gotten to know her. She does traditional old style desserts, which she like to do, but to make them healthier, she's replaced some of the sugar. She's gone to more, instead of caro syrups and molasses and things, she's gone to some sugar replacers and healthier alternatives. She uses a lot of applesauce. So I wouldn't say they're particularly healthy desserts, but she's made some nice modifications,
Hmm.
and she does things like sweet potato breads and such. So she's pretty well known. I think she was a secretary for a lawyer for quite a while.
Yeah.
So she's known around town and through the markets, and is, but yeah,
That was fun. That
yeah,
was fun. I mean, the last market of the season on Thursday, it's a Thursday afternoon market, so it's kind of a slower market. There's not as many vendors. There's
becoming,
not as
yeah, very
many,
slow recently.
not as many people going to it. So they did a little potluck for this last market of the season.
Well, it's not really the last market, but we're all shedding off. It goes through the end of the month, but it's my last market.
Okay,
So
it's our, yeah, for
yeah,
our pasta business, but so yeah, so it was an event for, mainly potluck for the different vendors and things and whoever else was
whoever else showed
there.
up, there was, yeah.
But it was a lot of fun, and they brought out this little
So
pipe organ.
it's a scaled down pipe order that's mathematically put together plans. It's like he thinks around 20 or so in the world. Um,
So not food related, but fun.
yeah, and then it's hand built woodworking skills,
Yes.
and then tuned by a professional, and it all pulls apart. All the pipes and everything are all just pegged in, so it all disassembles
So that's this. Yeah.
pretty easily and gets put in a case and all the way down to the bellows. So it's a pretty amazing
It's amazing
piece
instrument. Yeah.
of craftsmanship. So
Yeah. And there's plans for, I guess, people can purchase so they can build their own and whatnot. But I think they are trying to earn money enough to be able to buy the plans to build their own or something like
I
that,
think they want to build one,
or get someone to
or get
build it.
somebody to build one. It
Yeah.
takes a fairly skilled woodworker,
And
because
someone to tune it too, not
well,
just
and yeah, and
both.
then that may have to go out to a specialist. So
Yeah.
it's got two different sets of pipes that can be adjusted, turned on and off, and of
Yeah.
course it's airtight
Yeah.
chamber. So yeah,
It's a fun piece of instrument and craftsmanship there, so it's cool. But yeah, we are in a very, very busy week this week. So we are headed out to Homesteaders of America on Thursday, and we were trying to get chickens culled this weekend to the freezer to cut it back our flock in time for our farm sitter to come out, basically. House sitter, we have mini farm if you want to call it that, homestead. So it was definitely a busy day today, and I wasn't sure how fast I'd get things up and running, but it looks like we're good. Um, this week we did get 2 videos out, and I have footage for a number of others that I'll have to try to work on. But we have a chicken compost system. Part 2, the first part, it's kind of a combination of cleaning out and prepping the winter coop and putting last year's chicken compost into the garden to use. So that's what we do with that. Check out the video if you want to see how we set it up. We also had a video on when chickens conspire against their humans, basically. So we had some fall chicks, which we don't usually like to have, but we did. So we do have videos on that. And I had 5 other girls go broody. We're down to 3. 2 of them have broken, but you know, more broody girls than I have room to break them. So I'm not going to worry about it now. They can the person who's taking care of our chickens this weekend can push them off the eggs and gather the eggs, and we'll worry about it when we get back if they don't break their broodiness in the meantime. It's supposed to get pretty cold this weekend, so they may break. I don't know. We'll see. Oh, and City Girl can't stay long. Thanks for stopping in real quick. Okay, getting ready for a possible hurricane coming to South Carolina this week. I didn't know there was another one coming. Am I that out of it?
I heard there's something maybe heading towards
Yeah.
Florida, or maybe I don't know. I heard there's
Southern part.
something in
Okay.
moving. I haven't paid a lot of attention
I've
either.
not even been on the news that
We don't
much.
hurricanes don't. Well, we
Yeah.
get heavy rain occasionally when they eventually make it our direction, but
City Girl's probably close to your mom
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Not too far. Anyway, so, and who else do we have in here? We have Little Creek Homestead, Tina, hello, aim high, Teresa, 50 chickens in a hen house, I read aim high. Noah's Ark, hello, Browncoat Homestead, did you get a ride, or are you taking the bus from the airport on Thursday to Homesteaders of America conference? Getting started on homesteadings in here. Oh, we have a lot of people. Valerie, Bree, your mom, Carrie, that was back-to-back names that are too similar, hard to read. But welcome, Carrie, coming, I think, for the first time. And Linda, also here for the first time. So, yeah, Justin Roadshow for the premium members was just before this. So that was cool. He gives us a little push every time he does it, which is awesome. Just very nice. Actually, we bumped our time back to 9 o'clock because we used to be at 8 o'clock. We were thinking about doing it anyway, but his starting that live premium members show kind of pushed us to bump back to 9 o'clock, because who wants to compete with Justin Rhodes, right? And Truckage app is here as well. So cool. Lots of people in the room tonight. So we'll keep going. I do have a fun picture. If you guys follow us on Instagram, which, by the way, all our links are webpage, Facebook, Instagram, all that are below in the description. But I did post this earlier in the week on Instagram. It's Gus, the garden goose for our silkies, with a clean pool and a clean bowl of water, goes to stand in his clean bowl of water. So just, the geese are just characters. They like to do crazy things. So another thing that we do, okay, we do the forage food feature, which I'll get to in a minute. We also do Ask the Chef. So start thinking of questions for Mike. And I know we have one question already that Tina put on our Facebook page even before I was able to get up the notice to say Ask the Chef. She reminded me. If you think of questions, Mike's a chef. And if you have cooking questions at all, we can talk. Well, you can talk all night about cooking. I'll talk more about growing what goes in there. drought conditions in Missouri, and then we'll also talk about our forage food feature.
Yeah, we got we got
Yeah,
pretty dry for a spell in the middle of the summer, but then
yeah. The spring and fall are been
yeah, we've
wet.
been fairly wet, so we're actually evened out, and now we got a little dry for some week or two as some harvests started
Yeah.
to go, and it's been a little drizzly the last few days, so things have balanced out, not too bad, but
Yeah.
overall very wet with a little dry spell.
Oh yeah, you're near us, Linda. Well, fairly near us. North, yeah, just about an hour or two away, basically, Northwest Indiana by Lake Michigan. We're
Probably
about,
less, yeah, probably less than 2 hours,
yeah, absolutely, probably about an hour away.
because you can get to the border in an hour.
So we are about 30 minutes from Lake Michigan as well, but just west of Kalamazoo. So yeah, we are very similar, and so what we find foraging wise should match
Should be
up
the same.
very similar to you. Of course, the closer to the lake you go, the sandier it gets. So we are very sandy here, so that may overlap as well. So I guess, I mean, we could start with the foraged, but I wanted to do one little quick update. For those of you guys who have been following us for a while, we have this new dog who's actually in her favorite place, asleep behind Mike on the couch behind him.
Yeah, she's pretty sleepy.
She's exhausted, but she's extremely shy. But we've been able to get her on a walk almost every day this week, which is helping her open up to us a lot more. So that has been very helpful, and she's trusting me to put on her leash a lot more. I don't have to chase her around to be able to do that. And so I did take her on a almost 2.5 mile walk yesterday. Walk run, I will say. It was kind of back and forth, which is good for me too. But she hardly made it inside the door and fell asleep. So again, that was an Instagram picture, but she is getting better. We'll be doing more training videos with her as time
Oh,
comes.
Jamie's in the room. We were with Jamie much of the day
Oh
today.
yeah, Jamie, hi. Jamie was here. Actually, did I get that up here? I'm not sure if I put it up here. It was in the
You didn't
slideshow.
already?
No,
Oh, you didn't put it in your queue.
no, it was in the slideshow. I don't think I put it in my queue, the picture from today, because I haven't edited the video for it yet. Oh, yes, I did. Here we go. This is the result of what we did today. Earlier today, we processed 20 chickens with the help of Jamie Mosier, who lives not far from us, and his daughter. Um, so they came over with a plucker, so I didn't have to hand pluck all those chickens, and we were able to process them a lot faster. So we're going to do just a little. We have a how-to video that goes over processing chickens, but we'll do a little video that kind of shows how this machine has basically sped up the process quite a bit. And it's nice to have community,
Yep.
you know,
Ava helped
butchering.
helped eviscerate and
Yep.
clean chicken. She was skilled and knew exactly what to
Oh
do
my
and had been
gosh, yeah,
doing it a few times before, which is good. I
yeah,
usually do most of the evisceration
yeah.
since I've
She was
been the
good.
most used to doing cleaning stuff up.
She
But yeah,
wanted to get right into everything.
she helped clean it up.
Yeah, everything with it. And she helped catch the chicken. She was very good about that. And she's a 9-year-old girl. So
Yeah, she did
she
great.
was very much a help. And so was Jamie. Jamie did the first half of the job. And I was helping catching chickens and taking any remaining little feathers that were left off and bagging. So I was kind of doing the random other things. And you and Ava were basically um, eviscerating.
Yeah, so we were
So
cleaning out all the parts and separating them,
yeah.
getting them chilled down, and
So we had a little bit of assembly line.
so
Next year we might open it up if we could pick a date a little sooner and have a better plan to it. We might try to do the same thing if Jamie's available with his plucker.
let people come in with 10 or less of
Yeah,
their own chickens and
do a
do
community
so.
chicken
We
butchery.
this is probably our I don't know about sixth time I don't know our count that we've butchered chicken, so we're
Yeah.
getting pretty good at the setup. We've done it in heat and flies. We've done it so cold that the
Your
water didn't
fingers
want
are
to come
numb.
out of the faucet in the
Yeah.
morning, and the first thing you do is start water to get it hot so you can get dishwater
Yeah,
that you can tolerate. Today was kind of perfect,
it was
cool,
perfect.
little misty,
It
cool
didn't
weather in the
rain.
low 60s, so it
It
was no
it
flies.
rained this morning up until just before we started. So, and then it was like low 60s, so it was perfect. It was a bit overcast.
We have a pretty good setup, which we have videos on the tools and
Yeah,
videos on basic
the
butchery,
process. Yeah,
which isn't that different from anybody else. But we set up in our barn garage a
yeah,
portion and have a mobile setup. So even if the weather's pretty bad, we can at least buffer
going
being out of the
into
rain, and then we just have our scalding pot and such
yeah,
in the
basically in our workshop.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that works real well.
Yeah, and Little Creek Homestead, we technically don't do meat birds. We raise our main flock for all dual purpose. So
Naturally selected breeding, yeah.
yeah, so we
But
try
Jamie
and
was talking about, he might want
yeah,
to, he could, they did about 60 plus birds this year, and he did a bunch of Freedom Rangers, a bunch of Cornish Cross. He's done some other things.
yeah,
They've got a few other animals, and he was talking about the differences and their preferences.
yeah. Cornish
The
cross, the
predictability of the
Freedom
Cornish
Rangers,
Cross, 8 weeks and
yeah,
large and very predictable in size,
and then
has some advantages, but then we've avoided the domestic ones, but we get a fairly small bird. And some of these were smallest we've probably
yeah,
taken.
yeah.
So yeah,
We could have gone a little longer, but we also want to check to see how tender they are. And it's amazing the range and size we got from
yeah.
like 1.5 pounds to like, well, I won't even count the biggest one because
No,
that was a year
he
old.
was an older one.
But to about around 3 pounds were our roosters. Um, they were about 20 weeks. We did have one that was basically one or two that were really runts. They were tiny, but I'd have to calculate the exact age on them, but about 20 weeks on them. They're, like I said, they're dual purpose breeds, so they're not purebred either. They're half Chanticleer. And what we're trying to do is select for larger dual purpose breeds. Um,
Yeah, we need to work on getting
a
the
weight
weight
up.
up. We're getting good
Yeah.
eggs and good viability, and they do great in the heat and the cold weather. So we can talk about sassafras. We have some videos on
Yeah,
sassafras,
we
by
do.
the way. We have a sassafras jungle on a back portion of our yard. All like 50 foot sassafras and saplings all over.
I think they spread by runners
They
too,
do.
so that they keep wanting to move into our
We made
yard.
we made a tincture last year, which there's videos you can look through for that.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's the base for birch or for root
Oh,
beer
good night, Jamie.
and things
Yeah.
like that. Um, and yeah, thank you, Jamie. Had a good
Yes.
time and yeah, had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So the sassafras, you can do root beers and herbaceous beverages, teas, hot, cold, carbonated, and alcohol infused. But you can also take the leaves.
Yeah.
And they get dried and ground, and that is your filet for gumbo filet, which is used
Yep.
as a seasoning and sometimes a thickener. The one caveat is it is possibly somewhat low level carcinogenic. There's a lot of debate on how that's absorbed, but governmentally they don't use sassafras and root beer commercially because the potential. And I've been told to use the smaller size
But they
roots.
still use the leaves.
The leaves are still available for
Yeah.
gumbo filet because I think the Cajuns said, "No way, you're not taking it."
Well, that and the I forget the name of the chemical. I do actually have
There's some info. We focused on it
a couple weeks ago,
a couple months ago.
Yeah.
So yes, look at that. Sassafras is a very useful tool.
Below, by the way, if you want the written out, I have kind of blog style once a week what
for
we're
herb of the week,
focusing.
it was
It was herb of the week or
forage of the week.
forage food of the week. It's listed. The link to that webpage is below, and you can always follow along. What we're talking about during this show for this week's is actually going to be in that blog for this week as well. We try to post on Friday, but
And the
if I'm late on
sassafras
Saturdays.
wood smells nice, so
Yeah.
you could use it to season or possibly. I don't know if you can smoke with it, but you could
Yeah.
use it to maybe season the smell, put simmer in a pot or have it in a closet or whatever. It's a traditionally desirable, usable item for historically.
Yeah.
Homesteading and on the frontier, people would have desired to have sassafras in their yard, mostly for tea, making beverage.
Yeah. So Amy Honey's trying to figure out if she's spelling it right. I think that's right. I know it ends with one S, and I believe it's a double S in the middle, but
For what?
sassafras.
Oh yeah, I think so.
But it should show up red as you're typing. Well, I guess if you're on a cell phone, it might not.
There's somebody I ran across whose name was Sassafras.
Really?
First name, yes.
Huh. Sassy sassafras? No. But this week, we're focusing on hen of the woods or maitake. So if you click on that link below, you can read a little bit about it. I can pull it up, but here is a picture of the one we found outside. We have one particular white oak tree that seems to produce maitake mushrooms annually if we get enough rain in the fall. So this just popped up this week. Perfect temperatures. We've had rain. Um, it's a fun mushroom that the Asians actually love. Um, U.S.
I love it too. It's one of my
Your
one
favorite?
of many mushrooms I like, but it's a pretty usable. It's commercially available. You're seeing these little plugs that are about this big that are grown commercially,
Yeah.
and but they have very little petals and they're whiter because they've kind of bred them indoors like everything else, and they've selected varieties that they like. So you'll find a lot of variation in color and the formation
And
of
you'll
them
see
in the
that in the
wild.
wild too. Yeah, you'll
But
see
they
it.
have a similarity.
Yeah.
They definitely have a similarity
So I am
in
actually
look.
pulling it up, so I gotta move my chat
And there's
over.
no look-alike. So if you find
Yeah.
this and it has the structure to talk about, it should be just fine.
There's
Again,
no poisonous
poison.
lookalikes. There's actually some that look kind of similar, but they're also edible. So um, these guys love to grow at the base of oaks primarily, but
Big old
build old,
oaks.
oh, yeah, big old oaks. They actually rot the oak from the inside. So it's basically your older oaks that might actually be dying off, which is sad for the oak, but cycle of life and really good food for us as
Of course, this
well.
is one close to our house, so we don't
Yeah.
really want it to die off
No, we don't.
because we could have a
It's
problem with this half of the house.
yeah, it takes a
But
while.
it's in really good shape right
Yeah,
now. I
yeah.
don't think we're in any
I think it'll take
issue
a
of
while.
it.
But yeah, so this maitake basically it does have this petal-like appearance. I'm gonna bring the picture back up for you guys.
So hen of the woods, not to be confused with chicken of the woods, is the common North
Well, chicken in the
American
woods
name.
are edible too, but we haven't talked about them
But
yet.
this is a hen of the
This
woods,
is the hen of the woods.
different from chicken of the
I
woods.
get them mixed up sometimes. I don't think I will now. But the
Yeah, they
hen of
look
the
totally different.
they do. The hen of the woods is named actually after that petal shape because it looks like the round feathers on a hen. So that's basically why they called it hen of the woods. It grows at the base of the tree on the ground, but it's actually growing off the root system of the tree. Um, they can grow in clusters. You can sometimes get two or three growing off live trees usually, but
And they can
sometimes
get
dead trees.
from this size up to
They
this
can't see you.
size. They can get,
Big.
and some of ours grew like towers
Yeah.
that were almost a foot high. Uh, this one's pretty
This
good
one's
sized.
this one's a little bit smaller than the one we got a couple years ago, but we didn't get it. We didn't get to harvest it a
Yeah.
couple years ago because our chickens ate it first because our chickens were free ranging at that
The other thing
time.
is you want to snag them before they get too big because they will get tough in the
Yeah.
middle and just overall they'll get tough. Plus, if they get secondary fungus, they get bugs or they start to break down, then they're no good. So you actually want to catch it in a younger state so that you have the
Yeah.
most usable
And
portion and
you
clean. And this one is pretty clean.
it is at the base of it, it will grow through anything in its way. So you will get leaves inside of that base or twigs sometimes.
Yep.
So it'll basically grow right around anything that's in its way as it creates this kind of like puff, airy, feathery looking mushroom. So it is. So this one's nice and young. So we actually took the whole thing. Now when you harvest them, you leave the base in the ground to help it spread through the ground to other areas or through the root system of the tree, basically. So you don't want to disturb the mycelium in the ground. So you try to leave the ground parts there. So there's a one stalk that all these,
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say petals, but technically they're caps, grow off of. The top of the caps can be anywhere from basically tan colored to gray. It can be darker gray than this,
Brownish. Yeah.
brownish.
Yeah.
They can have a little variegation or streakiness
You won't
to
see
it.
any color. Well, it'll be browns and blacks, and
Yeah,
yeah, you won't see any other bright colors in it.
yeah. It'll just be like tan to brown and
Yeah.
black. Some of them are more solid. Some of them have this kind of streakiness to them. They're all maitakes. Uh, They have basically a central stalk that these petal looking caps all grow off of. Um, but they don't, each cap is attached to it by kind of a semi-stalk. It's flat. It's actually just a narrowing of the cap itself. It's not
Okay.
really a stalk itself. So there is another type that looks similar that has a real stalk, but it's also edible. Um, so it forms this kind of rosette pattern basically. You can harvest it. It might pop up in late August through mid-fall.
Depending on the rain and the cooling, a little bit of
Yeah.
cooling out of the summer, yeah, it's
Depending on
but
where
this
you
is the
are in the
right time.
country.
This is the right time. It might be a little late, but
Which,
this is right on, roughly on time.
yeah. So, and Tina says have I have some kind of oak tree in my yard. I have to cut a large limb off and I have mushrooms growing on it. I will have to look at them tomorrow. This won't grow on the limbs. This actually grows on the roots for
Yeah,
this
at
one.
the
So it's going to
base.
grow, basically, it's looking like it's growing out of the ground on this one at the base of
But
the oak
usually it's
tree.
almost up to the trunk.
Yeah, it's
They're
very
real
close to the
close.
trunk. So, so this one is not one that'll grow up on the tree up higher. It'll be growing lower. But up higher on the tree, you might get the chicken of the woods
Hmm.
or some oyster mushrooms. Um, there are other things that grow higher on the tree that I don't know and don't eat.
Yeah, most of the time there is. Yeah, so
Yeah,
your best bets on
or
that.
some other shelf
Um,
mushrooms too.
Chicken of the woods, which are bright yellow,
Yeah,
or chicken mushrooms, and they are a little earlier in the summer. Typically, we would be
a
kind of
little bit
towards the end.
August. Yeah,
Yeah, but they also can grow on oaks, and they're also similarly delicious and
yeah.
yeah, different but really good, and can be quite large. Also, you want those earlier so that they'll get tough.
They'll get tough as
They'll
they
get
get
even
older.
tougher than
Yeah,
the maitake,
yeah.
because the maitake you can kind of take the petals um, off,
Hey, living with
and
Kim.
the middle of it you got to decide because it gets fibrous like many mushrooms. The petals look
Yeah,
very tender and soft, and they kind
yeah.
of are, but they hold up like many mushrooms. They're actually very strong, so they'll hold up in soups and stews and stir fries.
So you can cook it slower. It's not going to break down.
Yeah,
So yeah, a lot of people use it in the stir fry soups.
you can tear the petals kind of gently along their
You can
and
roast them.
take them down in size. Yeah.
Yeah, you could pickle them. That's another thing. And I didn't even put this on there. I forgot. But you were talking about using the tough stalk and using it for making broth,
Yeah,
basically.
so if you think that you've gotten through the middle of it, which will be kind of fibrous and it's
Yeah,
kind of fingery and airy, you can always chop up your mushroom stalks if they're not too dirty or buggy,
yeah,
and just put them in some water and steep them because you'll get tremendous flavor and nutrients out of them. But if and you can do this with the chicken mushrooms too, which
yeah.
are very woody in the middle and styrofoamy and not good. You pull the flavor out in 30, 45 minutes. You don't need to leave it long, and then discard
The
the
actual
the
mushroom.
mushroom to the
Yeah,
chickens or compost or whatever, and then keep the broth and either reduce it or fortify it, and then make your soups
out of that.
and whatever else. And it's a
Yeah,
great way not to lose any of it that you wouldn't want to eat so much.
yeah. It is an interesting mushroom because in Asia, they've been using it medicinally. It's one of their favorite medicinal mushrooms. Between that, reishi, and turkey tail are the big ones, big three there. Um, and the Chinese in some of their oldest, uh, basically herbal medicine books, it goes back 3,000 years on the use. Now, there's obviously not a lot of modern science that goes into all this. It's really starting to break free right now. But the maitake, or the hen in the woods mushroom, there have been actual studies, phase 1 and 2 human studies. So if you think of clinical studies, they start trying to see if something works well on the cells in the petri dish in the lab. Then they start seeing if it starts working on animals. And then they start seeing if it works on humans in worst case scenarios, like the ones who are not doing well. And then they move more closely to earlier in treatments. So this has been used, phase 1 and 2 human clinical trials, which are, the
Which
people
is
who are
good. They
not
know
doing
it's not going
well.
to hurt anybody,
Yeah,
so it's a good.
those who are really not doing well, who have breast cancer, and it shows some immune response after patients get breast cancer, so the immune cells build up and help them fight the cancer. There's also animal models for colon cancer, not any human studies yet, but it indicates same kind of idea, increases the immune response, and increases this cancer cell death. So there are some, again, these are more preliminary. They're not focused in on, every patient yet, but on the other hand, you can eat this mushroom. So if you eat it and you get some benefit otherwise from it, that's awesome too. But so those are preliminary studies showing that yes, it does actually have some effect. The question is how much, and of course, there's always the question of does it interact with anything a person's already taken, and that takes further study. So if they're taking other medication, so yeah, I know. Aim high, eat your mushrooms, right?
Yeah, so this is part of a class that's commonly in Asian medicine called adaptogens,
Yeah.
which have a general well-being or a general immune boosting characteristics,
Hmm.
which we don't recognize. They call it non-specific activity of general, immune response, and we don't
Yeah.
really recognize that concept in Western medicine so much.
But they're actually
But we're
teasing out the
looking, we're
parts.
looking, yeah, we're
Yeah.
trying to pull out the parts. So, and this is one that seems to have not with crazy amounts or, you know, concentrates, but it seems not to have a lot of cross effects. The biggest
Yeah.
issue with using natural products is we don't know the regime that you're using with those with modern medicine.
If
Sometimes
there's,
it's worse interacting. I was writing an article 10 years ago, starting to look at some of this stuff just
yeah.
casually, sort of accidentally, didn't know it would become important. And there was a study in India where there's a lot of herbal Ayurvedic medicine and using warm and cold and adaptogens and things through diet. And they said that the number of hospital calls for people that were mixing traditional with the modern medicine and maybe not even informing their doctor, they just did it because it was tradition. They had a lot of emergency room visits because of counterindications or
So you got to be
toxicities.
careful. Yeah, you'd
Um,
always want to check with your doctor if you're using it
but the
medicinally at
great thing
all.
about these couple of mushrooms is it seems that it has a limited
It's
effect.
it's well, not, and not so much limited. It's not usually, they don't actually, the studies are not um designed to use at the same time as something like chemotherapy. They're used after,
Yeah,
to build up the immune system after. So there's less likelihood for there to be many interactions, but it's always good to check with
yeah.
the
Your doctor
doctor.
should always know what you're taking, obviously.
Yeah.
So they may not know that they may have to do their own research to see how it could be useful,
Yeah.
but they should know. So
Yeah.
you can
So
get this mushroom. Should be it's pretty abundant because it's large. You can get a lot of it. We did not get any last year because we had a drought and
yeah.
during the time, and they just couldn't get
They
enough
did
water
not.
to
We did
go.
hardly got any mushrooms at all last year.
But these would be a
Yeah.
common item to find from a forager at a market that can sell them in abundance, and therefore it's not extremely expensive like some of the premier boletes and chanterelles and morels because they're in limited quantity. These are so
Yeah.
big that they should be a few dollars a pound, and I've seen them on the internet. $10 a pound. That's probably pricey,
Yeah.
honestly. From a more direct source, you could probably get
You could
five,
probably find them at,
four, five, six, seven
yeah.
dollars a pound for nice clean ones.
Yeah.
So they're really usable as a food staple at a reasonable price. From
And aim high, yes. The two articles I list on the web page in the blog, I didn't link it into the description of the live show, but if you go to the blog itself and look at this, the two articles are both reviews of this mushroom, which is, the scientific name is Grifola frondosa. Um, One article focuses on this one and Ganoderma lucidum, which is reishi, or the more desired reishi, which actually I have a little one right here. Sorry, I reached into the camera area, but that is reishi. Um, so that's a tiny one though. The other article, the second one, actually focuses on reishi, turkey tail, and maitake. So all three. So yeah, you are. There's definitely a place for both Western and Eastern medicine. I agree. I'm a genetic counselor. I don't work on this end of things, but I do I'm doing my research here just to kind of link some of the information for you guys. So definitely do your research. Talk to your doctor. Don't do anything that's not, you want to make sure it isn't contraindicated. But of course, You know, you got to make sure your doctor knows what it is and has done the research too. Um, as far as so the links to those articles are there. There's 3 books I list on this webpage as well, that we use for identification, which is great. As far as lookalikes, like I said, there's no poisonous lookalikes, but you always want to make sure, especially with mushrooms, but any foraged food, that you know exactly what you're identifying. You want to be 100% sure before you eat any of it.
Clean soil, right environment, right trees, good condition, no secondary molds.
Yes.
When they start to break down, they get secondary molds or they start decaying. The mushroom can be just fine, but you can actually get toxicity or get sick from the environment and the other activities going on around it. There's no animal poop, so it's all based upon checking your environment while also
And
having a
I do.
100% positive ID.
And
This
if,
is one of the few items we will eat this
yeah,
mushroom. Um, but it's one of the few we're really comfortable with,
yeah.
and it's in our yard. We know exactly where it's at.
And this
And so
mushroom, okay, by the way, I didn't even go into it. It is a polypore, so if you look under those caps, there's tiny little pores in it. There's no gills on this at all.
no,
So that is another identifier. And the underside of each cap is usually a white to maybe off-white color.
yeah, it's going to
Um,
be much lighter than the
yeah,
top.
exactly.
We found this 2 years ago, and I was like, I wonder, I'm wondering,
You were thinking,
and
yeah,
I'm like, wow, I really think so. But because the morphology of it being much bigger than the cultivated
it was
ones and not being the specific cultivar that they tend to use, the petals and the coloration are
colors just a
weird.
little
And
different.
I'm like, I don't know, I don't know. And then that year, there was 2 years ago, we had an abundance of them,
Yeah,
and we were just trying to work with the forager, Nabi, and
yeah,
the farm, and they sell them at the market. And she had all different sizes, and I saw all the different variations
yeah.
in how the petals grew and the colors, and that they were very different from the cultivated ones. But
And you took a picture to her, I think, too, on
yeah,
that.
and then it was like, you know what, that's it. That we're
It's,
absolutely
yeah.
sure, because I had to learn the wild versus the cultivated. Um,
Yeah, because the cultivated tend to be like genetically very similar to each other
and
on the
they
cultivated
breed
ones.
for
Yeah,
tender and looking nice, all the things
the
like we
pretty
grow
things.
traditional fruit.
Yeah,
So they've bred only one species,
yeah.
cultivar, and this is a wild one. So the first year we did not eat it,
No.
and then we
So this,
waited last year and we didn't get any, so we're disappointed.
so we're
So this year,
excited this year. So I saw this. Oh, it was funny because we had friends coming with another Great Dane to play with Puddin', and we're out in the yard getting things ready, and you know, because Puddin's used to having other dogs, which by the way that went well. It was
she
very
responded really good.
calm.
Yeah, it's an old, very, very calm Dane.
Dane, and who's a therapy dog,
He
which I
almost
know.
he didn't ignore her, but
He was just kind of
he
hanging
just
out
hung
with
out,
everyone.
which was perfect.
Yeah, and she got to sniff, and we took him out
He's
for
a
walks and stuff.
hospital therapy dog.
Yeah,
Therapy dog. He
yeah,
does 2 or 3 days a week in the hospitals.
yeah. So we're getting ready, and I go out, and I forget what I was throwing over there. I think did I have a I don't even remember what I was throwing in the woods back over there. But I went over there. I was like, oh, we have a Maitake at our Maitake tree.
And I had been checking it off and on, hadn't seen anything. It
Yeah,
actually grew
me too.
faster than I expected.
That thing grew within
It grew
two
really,
days.
yeah, for as big as it is, it grew really fast. I didn't know
Do you
they
want to
grow
show them
that
how
fast.
big it is?
Oh yeah, we can get it.
Yeah, because it's hard to tell how big it is from the picture, and it's not the biggest one we've seen on this
We can
tree.
talk about mushroom storage also.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. I mean, he'll bring the mushroom back, and we can talk about storage. But by the way, the other two I mentioned, one has that are lookalikes that are both edible. One has stems off the caps that are more formed, and the other one has much larger caps that actually discolor when they're bruised. So those two are different. They may not be as tasty, but they are both edible. So you're not going to find a poisonous look-alike. But I should probably bring up our video so that you can see whether or not you're in the picture. And we'll go here. There we go.
So this is a medium size,
Yeah.
larger. So,
And you can actually
so it's
see
the size of a
that it's just one
big
stalk
head of
down here.
hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, the stalk. So, um,
And I just broke a little bit, but yeah.
yeah. So this is the underside,
Yeah, lift it.
um,
There you go.
and yeah, you have these very corally looking petals, which will break off, and
They
then
really do look like hen's feathers, the way they
yeah.
shape, and the way they fall and overlap each other.
And this is on the grayer, blacker,
Yeah.
darker.
And this has
This
gotten darker as we stored it in the
a little
fridge.
bit. So we
Yeah.
do. So refrigerators generally are a little too cold for mushrooms, and a little too dry. So things you can
Hi,
do.
Suburban Hillbilly.
Commercial mushrooms, you actually one of the few things you keep in the box
Yeah.
because that regulates the
The temperature.
temperature cycles as it turns on and off. The other thing is mushrooms respire a lot. In fact, when you do commercial packing, that's why they have the little dots in the plastic because they need to have enough respiration not to prevent some contamination, some disease issues.
So you don't want it in a plastic bag.
So they will suffocate and they will give off, they respire and they will give off water, which will become droplets, which will cause mold, which causes secondary infection and causes them to go bad. So you want them. This is a little. This is in the refrigerator. It's a little not real well hydrated. So you can wrap them in a light paper, like a squeezed out paper towel or very very dry squeezed out towel. I have a bunch of these commercial egg cartons, so I actually put it around most of the sides just to buffer it a little bit.
Yeah. And we plan on drying
a good
it
clean box would be good. So.
Drying it and cooking some fresh, probably, but we'd have to cook it fresh before we leave.
Yeah, we need to cook some this week, and the rest we should really get.
Yeah.
On a dehydrator. Get them dehydrated.
Yeah.
So the mushrooms, yeah, keep them a little warmer than your regular refrigerator. Keep them in a clean cardboard box.
How does it compare to a mushroom you buy at Walmart? Completely different.
It's going to be a little firmer and a little more chew. So it'll tenderize, but it will hold together.
Yeah.
It will. This is an earthy flavor wise. It's a fairly earthy, neutral mushroom. So if you like a white mushroom or a cremini or portobello, it's going to taste different, but it's going to be in that earthy, just sort of neutral, no crazy flavors. So if you like mushrooms, you'll like this one for sure.
And Claire, you're saying you're highly allergic to mushrooms. Now, different mushrooms might be slightly different, but then again, there are people who are allergic specifically to hen of the woods. So whenever you try anything foraged for the first time, even if it's known to be edible, you want to try it in small amounts so that you make sure you're not allergic to it, because you could have an allergic reaction that you didn't know about ahead of time. So of course,
and if you're trying a really new mushroom, obviously one that's been positively identified, some that people react to, some part of the population reacts to, you may actually want to have a small amount and then wait 2 to 3 days. Also, most wild mushrooms are cooked only; they're not eaten raw. It's rare. The white mushroom caps that we eat raw sometimes, that's not really. The rest of them are cooked. Some mushrooms will interact with alcohol even, so you need to.
I think chicken of the woods is one of those.
Really?
Not hen of the woods, but I think chicken of the woods can cause some people issues with alcohol.
Yeah, so there are some that can give you an extra headache or feel like a little hungover, nauseous. There's one that even 2 or 3 days later, you eat it, and I mean it can cause severe headache, vomiting. You have it can actually cause long-term medical issues. So if you're thinking about it, you may be having a special dinner and you would want to have, you may be opening up a nice bottle of red wine or something.
You want to be careful.
Mushrooms in France and cooking with French food and wine. So making that red wine sauce, having a glass of wine and a mushroom, and it's only a few mushrooms and they'll say in the mushroom books if there's an alcohol. What it does is it breaks down, the chemicals react with the alcohol, or the chemicals that break down alcohol or interact, and so you're having a chemistry issue that's interacting with the alcohol. So that's
what would you pair it with? We had it just
Asian soups and stir fries. It's great. You can.
What did we have it with recently? In soup.
Oh, I had it with some. Soup. Yeah, we had. I was given a bunch of.
We had it with our chicken and soup.
Yeah, braised chicken. Did a reduction stock.
Asparagus.
I had some asparagus and some snap peas that were given to us, and I put some maitake that I bought. Right before, a few days before we ran across this, I wouldn't have bought it. It was
that was funny.
Amount. I don't know if I bought it, if it was given to me.
Yeah, it's probably not.
I think I bought it actually, but I can't remember.
Yeah.
One or the other.
My
friend Alex, who's Russian, we cooked together. He's a real good cook, chef. He loved to roast them. So you can take the petals and take out the middle core, and you can put them on a sheet pan and hit them with olive oil or nice oil, little salt and pepper, maybe some fresh herbs, and put them in a real hot oven and roast them quickly. Or you can take the whole head and drizzle with olive oil, herbs, salt, and pepper, and almost like bake roast it, not
Yeah.
quite as hot, and let it roast. And so you're concentrating the flavors, and that's a really nice way to handle it, which is a little different.
Suburban Hillbilly, it might depend on what type of mushroom
Yeah,
can help
mushrooms
prevent.
they're so,
Um,
everyone's different.
there are so many different types of mushrooms. I
They're
mean,
little chemical factories, basically.
they are so, I mean, it's like saying plants will help headaches, but which ones? Because there's such
And
diversity.
mushrooms are so chemical driven, or they're off even more so than most of our fruits and
There's so much
vegetables
going
we
on
eat.
metabolically in them.
Yeah, because they break down the universe
Yeah. I
and
should
let it.
say
They're the
catabolic.
recyclers of the world.
Yeah.
And so they are truly, and they're decontaminators. They will take lots of toxic things. The right ones will take toxic things and break down. They use them
Yeah.
for industrial breakdown on certain things. So they are truly chemical factories. So
Yeah.
each mushroom is its
Natural.
own thing. Yeah. So yeah.
Can you freeze them?
You could. Now mushrooms tend to, like many things, you break the cell structures down, they get soft and wet.
Yeah.
Which means you're going to want to squeeze any of the water out that you can, and then use them. They may be better stewed than sautéed. It's not optimal. Dehydrating it works nice, and then you rehydrate them in like warm hot tea water and squeeze them out.
Can start homesteading. I've eaten mushrooms for years. That's why I've had hangovers 2 or 3 times a week. It's only certain mushrooms.
What
Yeah.
what else have you been adding to your homesteading that
Yeah, all right.
yeah,
The mushrooms and what?
and other good foods. So yeah, you can freeze them. It's probably not optimal, but again, they will eventually degrade and go bad. This holds a little longer than some mushrooms. So that is a good way to preserve mushrooms. Just know that water that comes off, sometimes you can use the water. Sometimes, but porcinis, it's bitter, and I find when I get frozen porcinis, I tend to squeeze them out and then discard the water because it's not tasty. But it's a viable way to use it and break it down. So
Yeah, dehydrated mushrooms instead of chips when you have them.
dehydrated mushrooms are great. I mean, there's basically no calories in them.
Yeah.
There's very low carb, almost no sugar. There's a little protein. There's a lot of creatinine in a lot of mushrooms.
That's why you have to cook them.
Yeah, and that's what makes them tough. So
Yeah.
creatinine is in your fingernails, it's in lobster and shellfish shells, which is why sometimes people have allergies to mushrooms because they have shellfish allergies. Now that your shellfish allergies can be related to a lot of things.
They can be related to iodine.
But some people that have a high likelihood of shellfish allergies also have a mushroom allergy.
Yeah.
So the creatinine is the toughening compound.
And that's a higher amount in wild mushrooms.
There's, I think, no fat in there.
Yeah.
So you're talking about extremely low calorie, a little bit of carb, and some selective proteins.
Yeah.
But yet it's
very filling.
You talk about it's not calorie dense, but it's nutritionally dense.
Yeah.
Micronutritionally dense. So it's a great thing to add in.
Okay, so
you can batter and fry them too. That's do a little fritter with them.
So I think we've talked mushrooms quite a bit, and we kind of are getting into cooking questions a bit, but there was, to change the topic of cooking, there was a specific cooking question that Tina had about, she had bought tahini to make hummus, and she wanted to know what else to put in there.
I got some tahini recently, actually.
What you could substitute and all the variations.
Tahini is being tossed on pasta, and people are doing like alternative vegan, vegetarian, and using. So tahini is pulverized sesame seeds that are milled very fine, and so it brings out the sesame seed pulp and the oils. There's a lot of oils in them, and it actually looks and acts and tastes a lot like peanut butter. If you haven't had tahini or don't know what it is. So consider it almost like a peanut butter substitute. It's used around a lot of the world as a flavoring ingredient. It's highly nutritious because of the fat, the protein, and it's an enrichener. So they put in all kinds of things. So it's a pure sesame seed. Sometimes it's a little toasted, and it's just pureed into like a peanut butter. So hummus or hummus is a big topic that I grew up not eating it young, but I've been having it for a long time, and there are a lot of small variations, and I will tell you it's a hotly debated topic, especially through the Mediterranean Middle East.
Tina says she has the best pasta in the world.
Oh, well, try putting some tahini on it. It'll be good. But you're seeing a lot, yeah. And there is,
By the way, for those of you who don't know, we do have a pasta sale going at your pasta business right now, so I'll just
that's
bring
right.
it
Oh,
up.
yeah, it is the last
It's
week. I forgot.
until
I forgot about that.
tonight. It's until
I thought it
tonight.
was still the homes. I thought it was still.
No,
Oh,
because we have to
oh,
bring
we have to be
them.
able to ship it or bring it. Yeah.
We have to bring them with us. We have to make sure we have them set to go.
Yes, that's right.
But until midnight tonight, there is a discount at www.westmichiganpastaandprovisions.com. The link is in the description below. If you use HOA 2018, you get 15% discount. And I don't usually advertise for that, but it was something that we put together specifically for homesteaders. So if you like pasta, you can check it out. But I just had to go there because it
And
came up
yes,
and I almost
we
forgot.
are
It's
sponsored
his
and
pasta
we are paid by that because that's actually my
because
job.
that's his
That's my
company.
job. So so that is one of the few things that we recommend. I mean, we have technically, if you buy stuff through Amazon, we could maybe get
Through our link,
a fraction of a cent at some point in the future. But anything else that we promote or recommend, we are not sponsored by
No.
anybody.
But it is his
But
business for that
the
one.
pasta is my business. So
Yeah.
yeah. So going back to hummus, it's basically chickpeas and some level frequently of tahini, not even always tahini. And it's hotly debated through the Mediterranean, Middle East, and Africa how it's to be prepared. In fact, I was just given hummus by some friends that are Lebanese yesterday,
Yeah.
incidentally. Um, it's a really healthy thing. Obviously, it's become very pervasive. So when I was growing up, there was a falafel and hummus shop called
Downtown.
Jerusalem Garden. So they were
Downtown Ann Arbor.
Israeli based items, and
There's a
so
lot of Lebanese
and
outside
then
of Detroit.
Lebanese and everything, all the rest of it, everybody does hummus,
Yeah.
even into Greece and parts of Italy. Use both chickpeas a lot
And tahini.
and tahini, especially as you get into the south and then Africa. So
It's just a Mediterranean
yeah,
thing.
North Africa. So they're highly nutritious, vegetarian, vegan, and what you're going to do is cook the chickpeas till they're very tender and watery and almost falling apart. And by the way, you do not need to cook raw chickpeas, raw dried chickpeas. It's fine. It takes a lot of time. So if you have a crock pot or Instapot, that's great.
But you can eat them raw.
Canned, no.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You need to cook chickpeas.
Yeah.
You,
were saying, yeah.
you don't need to buy and cook chickpeas.
Oh,
Canned
okay.
cooked
Yeah.
chickpeas are virtually very slightly less tasty, but they are virtually as good as going through the process of cooking beans. So it's like any other canned beans. They may not put a lot of spices and love into it, but a canned bean is still generally very good. So don't feel like you have to cook dry chickpeas. So you basically take a Cuisinart or a chopper and you puree the cooked chickpea and to a smooth paste. Some people, if you get really serious, like to take the skin off. There's always debates about how you make it the smoothest and whatever. It's really technical, and there's like world wars fought over it. So then, as you're doing that, you're going to puree it. You're going to add in frequently there's some garlic, and so you can fight about what type of garlic, whether you put some granulated or fresh or roasted. I like to make roasted garlic oil and put it in.
Yeah.
A little bit of fresh is typically good. And by the way, I don't like garlic powder, but the granulated, the chunkier stuff, using a little bit of that, it carries a lot of flavor balance in it, and it's not as raw and strong as raw garlic. So it does have a place, and it works pretty well using a little bit. Other things you can put in, sometimes there's cumin or a touch of coriander, or of course salt and pepper need to go in there a little bit. You definitely gonna need some salt, and a good amount of oil tends to get emulsified. So you're taking, whenever you take a bean, which is very high protein and smooth protein, you can puree that and it will start to taste creamy and rich, almost like fat. We can trick our brain because it's silky and smooth, like it's fatty. So other neutral beans, chickpeas tend to be one of the less beany tasting, why they work very nice. But you can do white beans and other things, and you're seeing a lot more commercially of white bean puree, same process. And then after that, it's really up to you how you season it. But traditional Middle Eastern hummus is going to probably have some lemon juice in it. It may have some white vinegar. You can use a little white vinegar, works well, but fresh lemon juice is great. So acidity, cumin, coriander, sometimes a little paprika. People grind in all types of things, and then you can bring it together with um, the tahini. So now you take a spoonful of the tahini, which is a balancing flavor, and it's fatty also, along with the olive oil, and you blend that in, and it has a really nice emulsion and gets really white and creamy. Um, that is, some people like almost none. Some people like a little bit, and some people like a lot. I think a high quality hummus has a reasonably large amount of tahini, but tahini is the expensive part compared to the chickpeas. So, um, I'm thinking ratios. If you have a can of chickpeas, I have a preference of putting a couple big spoonfuls of tahini in, but it could be none, could be a little bit. I just think it brings out that creamy peanut buttery sort of a both sesame flavor.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so secrets to it are make sure it's seasoned well, make sure it blends for a long time. It can be pretty thick. In fact, it's usually too thick and you need to add some water unless you really did your own chickpeas and cooked them soft. You're going to add a little bit of water to it and then acid of white vinegar or lemon juice and obviously some form of garlic most often. But you can be really creative. Look at all the commercial stuff. They're putting all kinds of junk in there. And then traditionally, once you make it nice and should be served more room temperature, but it does need to be refrigerated because it'll. Sometimes they put a couple fresh chickpeas on the top of it as garnish, and then traditionally in the Middle East, you kind of smear it around in a dish and spread it out, and then you pour a good amount of a pretty good quality olive oil, so it sits with a kind of a pool of olive oil over the top, and then when you scoop it, you're gonna get some of that fresh olive oil along with the chickpeas.
Yeah, Bree, we could talk about food all day and make people hungry at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, so the nice thing about hummus, you can buy canned chickpeas really cheap, and I don't see a huge difference. There is a difference, but I don't see a huge difference in brands. So go for go for the value brand if you want. We grew some.
We want to grow more next year.
But you typically, before you make hummus, you typically dry them, so it would be a dried chickpea.
True. We could do that too.
But yeah, can of chickpeas, which will cost you well under $1. Tahini will cost you $3 or $4, but you'll get a few batches. White vinegar is next to nothing. Lemon juice costs a little more. Don't use bad lemon juice. Skip the stuff in a jar. It's disgusting. The cooked stuff. Either use fresh or use the frozen, or just use a good white or red wine vinegar and skip that other stuff. It's not helpful in most anything except for it's good for cleaning stainless steel. Yeah. And so it's a very inexpensive way. It's a very nutritious, big part, almost a daily eating item for a good portion of the world.
It is, yeah, all around the Mediterranean. It's
good healthy fats, good mix of good high fiber. So it's a really good item. Yeah.
So yeah, I was just trying to see if we missed any other questions. Yeah, I curious about the falafel. You can get bad falafels, the ones that are.
There are a lot of bad falafels. They sell these dehydrated ones that you just put hot water in it and you mix it together. They taste like sawdust.
Yeah.
The best ones I've had, I worked with friends who lived in Lebanon. They made their own, so they would actually take dry chickpea, and falafel can be made with chickpea or fava bean, and you could actually do a fava hummus. So they would soak them overnight, soaked beans, and pour off the water, and then they would marinate with the next day they would marinate with onion and garlic and sometimes leek and fresh herbs, and they would marinate it all in a big tub, and then we actually sent it through a meat grinder on a medium to finer grind, not a fine grind. So we ground it raw through a meat grinder, and then we formed the patties. And they get fried quite dark. They usually turn very dark brown because of the natural color. Some people add in egg or flour or other binders.
See it, Teresa?
That's not traditional. It should hold together when you're making a falafel without having to put in egg, without having to put in flour. So if you're doing egg-free, gluten-free, vegan cooking for somebody, it's a really good way to induce protein. So it takes more time to make a fresh falafel, especially, and you got to have a grinder if you're doing that. Otherwise, you can buy kits, and some are better than. But the dehydrated stuff is. It's bad. It's really bad. Go to a local deli and buy a few and reheat. And they'll sell them cold a lot of times, and then you can reheat them.
Bree, you're only 7 o'clock there. No wonder you're hungry. It's dinner time.
What's a good olive oil to use?
olive. How do you say it?
Olivante,
Olivante,
which is from Lebanon. We
which we actually,
partner with a Lebanese
yeah,
olive oil seller that imports to Michigan. It's a
yeah,
premium quality.
small company, and we don't have it on the webpage
Yeah, we're
yet.
gonna get it on there.
Yeah, we will get it on
So
there.
those are $35 and $40 for
They're
250 ml. They are specialty items, but we
yeah,
work with the local grower importer from a small farm, and that's just a side part of our provisions line.
yeah.
But olive oil, so you want to get extra virgin, which means it's first cold pressed, etc.
If you see EVOO, extra virgin olive
Nobody
oil,
writes EVOO. That's Rachel
uh,
Ray. That's
yeah, it goes across the internet. That's what they're talking about.
yes,
Yeah.
but nobody writes that on a bottle. That's some American silliness. It will all say, and
Extra
so
virgin olive oil.
olive oil, of course, there's chemically or second pressed, which is usually just olive oil or blended or sort of industrial, and then there's, or say, pure olive oil. That don't mistake that for extra virgin, which is your higher quality. So extra virgin olive oil should cost you for a liter, which is about a quart, should cost you in the $15 to $30 range. And a fine quality French or international high quality olive oil could cost you up to $60 a half liter.
Yeah.
Spanish olive oils tend to be great. Good price point, good quality. There's a lot of adulteration on olive oil. So you want to, so if you're paying less than like $12 to $15, be for a liter,
Wary.
be wary of the quality.
Yeah.
How, because they should only be around for a year. They tend to taste rancid. They get blended. There are good blend oils.
Unless you're extremely lucky and go to a place like Myers where they were selling everything
Oh,
out.
they were closing out
They
after
were
an
closing out.
Italian event for like $4 bottles, so I bought a few.
Yeah, but it
So
was really expensive olive oil otherwise.
yeah, it was moderately
Oh,
expensive. It was, they were selling it. It was imported, so they had it prices really raised on
Yeah.
it. But olive oil is always going to be fairly expensive. And Colavita and Bertolini or Bottoli and all that stuff, they're pretty good. They're respectable labels. And what you'll find is the French and Italian are very expensive because there's limited amounts. Spanish and Greek and African and Australian. There's a California one, which is awfully green flavored, but they have different nuances and flavors. So you find one that you like. But if you have, there's bad, funky flavors, that means it's old. And the really cheap ones are blended or adulterated. They've done things to them, so avoid those. You're going to have what you can do if you want. So you use a good quality olive oil. You don't have to break the bank on, but you use that to finish items, to put on the top of your hummus. Maybe put it in the hummus, tomatoes and mozzarella on your salads, finishing a dish. You can cook with it, but the high heat will break down some of the quality of the nutrients.
Yeah.
So you don't have to use, and olive oil can get strong. So it's going to go through your flavor in your eggs and other things. So if you don't like that flavor and don't want it with your eggs, and eggs with olive oil tastes good, but I'd rather, unless I know it's got olive oil, I'm expecting more of a buttery or a neutral vegetable oil flavor. So you can get blended oils where they're going to blend in other things, like in the restaurants we use 50-50 blends, 70-30 blends, where it's 70% canola or vegetable oil and then 30% or 50% olive oil. And they still use a cheap olive oil, and it's not extra virgin.
Yeah.
So you'll get the olive oil flavor, but it's subdued. In fact, when you make a dressing, which is usually 1 part vinegar, 2.5 to 3 parts oil, olive oil is too strong and too expensive. I like to only do a little bit of olive oil and then use a less expensive oil. And you can buy blended oils that have things like canola oil or grapeseed oil and healthy oils, Mediterranean blends. You can find them at your store, these blend oil, and they're going to bring the price down and give you a really, really healthy and still a good flavor. And you could use that for almost everything.
For cooking
and for definitely, I use them for cooking. I may finish with it, but I'm more likely to use the flavor to finish with something else. So we happen to buy a product at Costco that's $15 for like 2 liters. It's less than that. It's like 10. It's 2 or 3 liters, and it's $12 or $15
for cooking.
For cooking, that I like a lot because it's got grapeseed oil, which is high vitamins if it's raw. Handles heat extremely well. They've got some canola, which is also generally healthy, neutral, and very high heat. And then it's got some olive oil, and it's a really good balance. So I use that for general cooking, and then I have olive oil that I finish when I want to use it. And I just buy also a bulk. I use the Olivante for specialty stuff, but for larger amounts like making hummus, I will buy a Costco or a Sam's Club or a Cola Vita, and I love the Spanish oils. We used one.
And then you finish with
We
olive
use
on too.
Zoe a lot, which is a medium priced oil. In the restaurants, we use Zoe a lot, and I liked that.
Yeah.
We used it for everything. So
Yeah.
olive oil is a tough category, and you're just gonna learn what you like, but do be wary. If it seems too good to be true, it most definitely is an
The
olive oil.
price, yeah.
Don't feel like it's like wine. You can have a decent glass of wine with an $8 or $10 or $12 bottle of wine. Um, the box isn't going to really taste quite the same, but if you put some ice cubes in it or whatever, it's okay. Um, you don't have to buy a 60 or a $300 bottle of wine. Yeah, are
No,
they maybe amazing or rare? Yes, they are. But there's nothing that says you have
no.
that your experience of a $60 a liter, half liter of olive oil is going to be worth you spending it. It's more than you need to spend unless you want to.
Yeah. Yeah, you have, oh, Tina, that's cool. You have a friend who worked in Spain who would bring some to you.
Well, I would trust them. If you have friends that bring back now, some parts they get very
Couldn't read the
large
bottle. Yeah.
amounts, and they bulk it, and that
Yeah.
tends to go bad the way it's stored and pressed or the quality.
You do
Where
want to actually store the good olive oil away from your stove, according to our friends,
yeah,
because the heat, unless you're using it going through it pretty quickly, the heat is not good for it. It'll
keep it.
go,
You don't need to refrigerate it unless you're doing long-term storage. If it's a green bottle, it's great, but keep it out of extreme light.
and
Huge temperature differences or very hot.
yeah,
It'll go bad faster. And keep it capped.
yeah,
Um, So
but
those
yeah,
those are good things. But yes, if you have friends that have a recommended, well, it may just be because they grew up with it and that's their preference. Um, but I would trust them because there's a lot of secondary markets that aren't main labels that are much cheaper and very good.
her ghee can go high heat for
Yes,
cooking.
ghee is designed for
It's
that.
not fancy like olive oil though. No,
Ghee
it's
is totally different. So ghee is purified butter fat. So
yeah,
they've taken all the protein, water, and contaminants, particles out. That's what burns. That's your brown butter. So they remove all of that so that you can use it as a pure. It's a pure butter fat, which butter has oleic acid, which is that uniquely buttery flavor.
mm,
And so ghee can be used in any use. Of, it will set up and get hard if it gets cold. And it is fancy. It's expensive. So butter's $3-4 a pound. If you take out at 20-25% of it, so butter is about 20% solids and water. So you're down to 80%. So by the time you make ghee, it's pricey. And ghee tends to be a little browned. Clarified butter, French style, is not brown, and ghee, they tend to brown the proteins a little bit. So you get some
mm,
some caramely notes in it. Ghee is shelf stable because everything's out of it. It's just butter fat. You can leave it on your counter capped.
mm-hmm,
Don't need to refrigerate it. It will not go bad.
yep.
Um, so it is kind of fancy, but it's going to give you oleic acid notes, and so you're going to use it completely different than olive oil. And it's got totally different but it's high heat, but you're going to it has different um, medical and chemical properties than an olive oil and plant-based oil because it's a dairy-based oil.
Yeah. I read that as you have Carpelli now on sale for $0 instead of $10. um,
Um,
yeah,
Carapelli is fine. It is a commercial brand. I mean, this is just my opinion. I think it's a middle of the road. It is definitely a step up. There are I'm trying to think of some, I don't want to bash any labels, but there are, I don't know, some discount brands. There's some of the Latin American brands that are junk. People are pulling one over. They're taking really bad quality. There's a major brand from a major food service company that they do a blended oil that's rancid. It's been rancid for years. I smell it right away. I cannot use it. It's a major food company that
oh
sells
geez,
probably a million gallons of it, and it's disgusting. So
yeah,
it's out there. But Carapelli is fine. It's not fancy, but it has a nice green flavor. So what you're looking for in olive oil, it can be green, it can be herbaceous, it can be fruity, it can be minerally,
it could be
it can be
buttery.
peppery, it can be buttery. Um,
A lot of varieties.
Americans like butter, so that means Colavita is super buttery. If you want um, Bertolini or Bertoli is a little greener, but they're all medium to mild. And by the way, light olive oil means light in flavor. It has nothing to do with nutrition. Frankly, if you want to use olive oil, there's no reason to buy light because you should just buy blended vegetable oil, canola oil, grapeseed oil, whatever you like, because you use it for the flavor.
Yeah.
So light is kind of worthless in my opinion. But you're going to figure out based on what you're cooking, what you like,
Hmm.
and you're going to find a style, and you're going to find a price point and an availability of something that you can regularly get off the shelf in your local area. And we rely on Costco because they do a lot of that work for us. They have a really good food department, and they fight really hard for good quality products at generally extremely well priced. And we just happen to use Costco because it's really close to us.
So,
And so I can tell you, I'm happy with their olive
yeah.
oils. I find them actually for the money very, very good. But I've got many other olive oils that I like too. So
Suburban Hillbilly. I didn't actually say how many baby chicks on this live show, did I? We do have babies. Did not mean to have baby chicks, but our most recent video upload does give you that answer. So I'm gonna say you're gonna have to watch the most recent video upload to see
mm,
that. You'll also see how in that video how many hens went broody, which I think I did mention that we had. I'll mention that. And I think we had actually, I think I may have said it wrong. We had the one who has the chicks, but we also have 5 others go broody. Kind of crazy. 3 silkies went broody, although 2 of them have stopped already, so we just have 1 now. And 2 from the main flock went broody, so that's a pain. But wrong season for that. I did not have that many broody girls at once this spring
no.
at all. That's crazy.
Oh, one more thing on the olive
Olive
oil.
oil.
If you're sauteing or cooking with olive oil and high heat, a nice way to balance it is so whole butter burns because
Good night, Aim.
because
Hi.
it's got protein in it and water, and the water spatters and the protein burns. You can
Nope, Tina.
you can blend olive oil with whole butter, and that whole butter will be buffered and protected somewhat by the olive oil. So the flavor of using butter and olive oil together and cooking. Try cooking a chicken cutlet, like a breaded chicken cutlet or pork cutlet, in a nice pool of, and not a strong olive oil, just kind of a average olive oil,
Hmm.
and some butter, or even cut the cost down and use a little bit uh, of neutral oil, vegetable oil in there, you will find that that cutlet tastes so good because of that olive oil butter combination.
Hmm.
It's really, really nice.
Huh. All Costco's are a little bit different on how they set up themselves up, but most Costco's, Suburban Hillbilly, most Costco's will have a little computer up front where if there's something specific that you would like to see at the store, you can make suggestions. So if you can't find something like kitty litter at your Costco and you want to buy it through Costco, at least our store here, and I think the one in New York also had that
Yeah.
system where you can actually put in
Huh.
suggestions or go to the information desk and ask if
Yeah,
they
we have a
could get it.
smaller one here than in New York. Was much bigger. They carry a
Yeah,
lot more higher end and specialty products.
yeah,
Prepared item. They just carried a lot. It's a lot bigger store. It was
yeah,
also a lot busier.
yeah. Well, it's
So,
crazy.
do I make ghee? I have made ghee. I find that it is much more cost effective to buy it.
Hmm.
So ghee, you're going to have to first buy butter,
Yeah.
and then you're going to let it melt, and you're going to let it. There's a bunch of ways to make clarified butter. I like to actually put in a double boiler, let it just sit there, and eventually the protein and it's
It
not
separates.
separates to the top, and you skim that off, and the fat will then go to the middle, and the water will go to the bottom, and you're going to skim off the fat and leave the water, taking as much fat as you can get off.
And you keep the fat part.
You only keep the fat. Everything else
Yep.
gets thrown away. Now, ghee, they tend to simmer it till the water evaporates and the protein kind of coagulates either at the top or the bottom. The problem is you got to watch it really close because it'll stick to the bottom, and eventually when it burns, and it'll get a little toasty. But once it burns, it ruins the whole thing. It's like burning tomato sauce, which is what one of my friends was talking to me about last night. What they do is double clarify it. So they first take the water off, and then they get a little bit nutty. I don't think so. By the time you go through the cost and you watch it, and the time and the heat and the possibility of burning it, you're better off going to whoever your local international store that sells ghee and buying it. Another thing they'll do is they'll buy lower quality butter that may not be grade A butter that's going to be going to commercial patties. And they're going to use that because they can make it into ghee. So they're going to make the price difference there. They're going to sell
Yeah.
it to you. at a much better price.
Cost.
Um, so yeah, clarified butters, no nuttiness. You can also buy commercially a blend, a clarified butter. Watch out for the whirl and all these things that say they're margarine based and margarine oils. That's different. You can get a blend that's like a 50-50. Land O'Lakes sells it commercially in big tubs because it's very expensive. You know,
Yeah.
for the high-end restaurants still use it. Nobody else does use butter in that way. It makes a huge difference in traditional cooking if you can griddle with your griddle with butter instead of an oil or a butter blend, which is way too strong. It has that popcorny butter flavor to it. Whirl and all these things they're kind of rough to work with. Um, but they'll do an oil butter 50-50 blend that reacts similarly and you still get some of that buttery flavor. That's a nice way to meet the difference if you can afford it to some degree, but you can't afford straight out butter. I worked in one place, we clarified 2 or 3 cases of butter, and you're talking between $35 and $45 a case depending on the time of year. And
In cases, how many pounds?
30.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. You're talking 90. I'm sorry. You're talking up like $90 a case. We were clarifying like 3 cases of butter a week, and we had buckets of it, and we would just ladle it on the griddle, and we would cook on it, and it was great. But that was only one place that we could afford to do that.
Yeah.
But all the old French cooks, that's what they used.
Yeah.
They griddled with oil, olive oil, and sautéed with. I mean, with clarified butter. Coconut oil is fun to work with. Watch out, there is like virgin coconut and cold pressed coconut, and then there's chemically extracted or palm oil. It's not it's other oil palms. It can taste kind of medicinal and strong. It can also go rancid and give you weird flavors. So there are different qualities in coconut oil for sure, and palm.
Yeah.
Um, it is a saturated fat in that it coagulates at room temperature. It does not have trans fat. It is generally not considered among your healthiest fats in at least current thought. There's some differences in opinion on that and how it's used and how your body converts it and does your body absorb it well. So a lot of the world uses palm oils or coconut oils because that's what grows and it's
in their area.
yeah, and they will set up hard so you can make a non-trans fat like margarine or other things with it, or to do pastry work where you need these hardened fats. Um, so that's why it's prominent, but we really stopped using it in the US until we had the whole trans fat thing come up, and then they all of a sudden just started injecting it back in. Um, and so it's got a tool. So a lot of commercial baking uses it for price point. But because it is saturated, it doesn't have the olive oil, canola oil, grapeseed oil, even cottonseed oil. They have really good vitamin, really nice balances. You're looking at your omega-3, 6 balances. Tends to be your healthy oils. Then comes your other vegetable-based oils, so corn, soy, and related mixed vegetable seed oils are kind of generally healthy. And then you're moving into butter has its positives and negatives. Palm and coconut has negatives and positives. But it's a respectable thing to cook with. I wouldn't use it for everything. I just made some rice with some today. I don't. My personal opinion, it's probably shouldn't be used exclusively. It's not the healthiest, but as a mixing it up. Some people say because we don't eat a lot of palm oil in the United States, our body doesn't digest it very well, which means we reject it or we resist it, so we don't absorb it, and so we have less of a caloric issue, although your body will slowly adjust. Some people, if they eat a lot of palm oil, get really bad diarrhea because they don't adjust. They're not digesting it yet. So that would be somewhat temporary. So I would say use it. There's a lot of hype on it, and I think dietitians would generally agree with this. Use it, understanding it's a tool, but probably not your best choice in mass quantities. So.
Your mom's weighing in on the best thing to use for pie crust.
Well,
which is
commercially,
debated.
they're going to tell you lard. Leaf lard is the flakiness, and it does give a nice neutral, clean flavor, and that would be.
But she likes the buttery
Yeah,
flavor.
I like doing butter too. Butter has the water. That's the problem. That's why it gets soft because you get more water in it, and it causes it to not fry. The oil is causing a frying of the fat. You can blend them 50-50.
Could you use clarified butter?
Well, it needs to be solid because you're laminating.
Okay.
So if you could extract the water and clarify it, and then get it spread in there properly, that would then probably behave a lot like lard. Lard has a different melting temperature, and it's also got no water in it, and so that would be lard, which is typically it has been de-aromatized, so it doesn't taste porky.
Hmm.
You can use beef with beef tallow, which melts even higher. You can use beef, which has almost no flavor. You can use pork. If you use um, untreated pork lard, like you have your own pork lard and you make it, and you're making a meat pie, you're gonna get a little bit of a porky flavor, light, which would actually be really nice, but it may be a little less desirable in your apple pie, or especially in like a
I don't
sweet
know.
roll.
Apples and pork go well together.
Yeah, so you would but it's typically de-aromatized. Um,
Leaf lard. I grew up on a farm. What's the difference?
Leaf lard comes from certain parts, usually around it's the heavy lard in the belly area. So we have
Is
intermuscular
that
fat, which is your marbling.
the one that looks like netty?
No,
No, that's the.
that's caul fat.
Oh, right. Yep.
That wraps the organs. So when you get into the lower organs, you pull out the organs and you have back towards the back, you're going to have these chunky knobs of
Okay.
hard white fat, which is also where the beef tallow comes from, which could be rendered for fry oil or used in like treacle tarts and the English cooking, which it melts differently at a higher temperature, so you get a different yield you get a different crumb and texture on those items, which is what you can't replace it properly with other things. So the leaf lard comes out of a specific area. It's not good for much else, and it's in abundant. You can pull out like handfuls of it, and then you would render it down, or you would chop it up, but it's already pretty clean. So lard doesn't have to be pig fat. Lard is animal fat, solid animal fat. So it could be from any animal. You can do lamb, which is going to be pretty. It's going to have a lamby flavor. You can do beef, which has almost no flavor, which is why they used to fry fries in it, because didn't taste like lamb or pig or chicken. Chicken has a very chickeny flavor. So if you render and clarify that, it becomes schmaltz, which is a traditional for Jewish cooking, where you couldn't use bacon fat or pork fat, but you wanted to have a flavorful fat. You would cook in schmaltz, which is a nice. So, and we could talk about some other point how you properly clarify and clean up pure fat. It's become very popular in people going back to whole animal butchery, both in restaurants starting 10 or 15 years ago and now home, to start using that fat again. We really just discarded and said it's unhealthy. Well, we're finding out, balancing our fat, not using too much butter, and definitely watching some of our heavily processed fats, even vegetable fats and trans fats, people are realizing that animal fat isn't nearly as bad. So the companies that were resisting the butter and the animal fats, marketing wise, says you need to use vegetable fats because they're making money. Well, we're realizing you shouldn't eat too much, you need to eat it in balance, but you can eat a lot more animal fat. So people are reclaiming that fat, that extra heavy fat that's trimmed, the really thick stuff that wouldn't be that little cap that you leave on a meat cut, could be chopped up and go through again this rendering or clarifying process, or the leaf lards, which are the highly prized, which come out and almost ready to use. Because now, one, you're not buying oil. If you're doing your own animals, it's already there. So you're not buying another product. You're not wasting a product and throwing it away. So you can do oil lamps, and you can do tallow, and in different soaps, and if you have way too much fat, typically you'd make soap with it. But cooking in animal fat, then it also imparts the fat flavor of that animal's flavor. So what's better than cooking pork in pork fat or lamb in lamb fat and bringing, as long as it's not going rancid and strong?
It's like making my favorite duck dish.
Duck fat is even
Confit.
one of the most expensive fats. You can buy that.
Oh.
You can order that commercially, and I mean it's fairly expensive, but it's clarified duck fat
and you put the leg
goose
in
fat,
the duck fat, and it
and so you put the herbs and spices, but it imparts that flavor. So thinking about using animal fats, it's not nearly as everybody's like, oh, you can't eat that, it's going to kill you, it's a walking heart attack. Actually, duck fat and the free range and all the grass, they're finding that
the
duck
higher
and poultry
omegas.
fat is actually pretty good for you, even though it's saturated and other things. And if you do grass-fed pork or free-range pork that has a wide variety, that fat is much more similar to the other healthy fats. And so the thought on fat use has changed dramatically in the last 20 years and gone back to what it's always been traditionally. So my thought is change it up, be smart about it, price conscious, change it up. If you're using a variety of fats through your cooking and focusing on some lean plant olive oils and canola and grapeseed and other good healthy oils, you should do just
Keep it
fine. You
variety.
shouldn't have a health issue coming from your fat use.
Yeah.
And watching, can't fry stuff all the time.
Yeah,
I don't even own a fryer. We just don't fry at home. It's not a health thing.
Pan fry
It's
sometimes.
just expensive, and I pan fry occasionally. And
Yeah.
we like cast iron.
We do like cast iron.
Very useful.
We
Cast
could
iron,
use some
copper.
more little varying sizes cast iron potentially.
Yeah, there's a lot
that'd
of
be fun. But yeah, actually, one of my favorite places to watch for cast iron is Treasure Mart in Ann Arbor.
Mhm.
There's a little consignment shop there that, not so little, it's 3-story consignment shop there that has a kitchen section that sometimes you find good stuff there. But okay, it is getting late though. It's almost 10:30, and
avocado oil is similar. It would be similar in many ways to olive oil.
yeah.
Different, but it would be the closest similarity to the other vegetable-based extraction of oils. So, and then you have your nut oils. You don't really cook with them; they're too expensive, and so some of them are not heat tolerant. So you want to look at things that can handle high heat.
Yeah.
Most important if you're frying, but if you're sautéing, you want things that don't break down and burn up. Olive oil, if it's not too green, it's a lower heat than some, but it actually has a pretty good heat threshold. It's only a few degrees lower than standard vegetable oil. And canola oil, grapeseed oil are very high heat. And so a lot of it's about the flavor. But things that have particles in it, nut oils, absolutely not. Animal fats need to be clarified before you put high heat because they'll spatter and burn and do all kinds of things. So.
Yeah, I'm getting tired. I have to get up early tomorrow, so I'm going to, unless you really want to keep chatting about
I got a
different
pretty
oils.
busy week. I got a lot going on this week, so
we
we're
should
leaving
probably,
town
yeah, we're leaving
for the
town Thursday.
weekend. So that's
We're leaving town Thursday. We're coming back on Sunday, next Sunday. So I'm not sure if I'll get a foraged food feature blog up for next
we
week.
have to get the house. I got a lot of business stuff and other things. We got to get the house set for. We got a house sitter here and all that. So.
But I will say, if we're home by 9 o'clock next week, which we should be, well, I should say before 9 o'clock, by 8 o'clock, so I have time to prep. We will kind of do a little review of Homesteaders of America conference that we'll be at. So if
we might do a live feed at some point.
We might do a spontaneous
probably
live
be
feed.
Facebook live feed.
Oh no, you do on the cell phone on YouTube.
You could do YouTube. Yeah, you
we
could do Facebook or YouTube.
My first live feeds on YouTube were on using the cell phone. So, so as long as we have good cell service, we might be able to do a live feed from the.
And we are driving, so.
We are driving down there.
Truckage. We are not driving our truckage, though. We have a big
Princess.
old truck, but we're not driving the big old truck. I actually need to get that in the shop. It's got a little electrical.
Princess
short.
It's funny. Just before the road show, we butchered chickens earlier, so I took a shower. So my hair was soaking wet during the road show. I'm thinking pretty dry now. You need to join Puddin' and sleep. Yeah, Puddin' is curled up in a ball on our couch behind us.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a government scam or it was a big industry marketing scam. I think a lot of it is we were trying to fight a lot of health issues, which we saw coming as people were coming off of more labor-driven lifestyles and careers and farms and seeing health issues. We have a lot of health issues in this country with heart and and vascular and weight and everything else. So they're trying to attack that, and we're starting to do research and look at things, and they were shooting at, well, if people are too fat, they need to eat, or having cholesterol, they need to eat less fat. Well, then we figured out a whole bunch of other things.
Oh, cool, Tina.
And we've kind of more research, and we realize that it's not so simple. What goes in sort of comes out, but it also gets processed.
It gets processed in your body,
so I think we're learning a lot more, and we're opening up to a lot more international diets, and so we're just understanding ingredients a lot better. So yes, some of it may be big conspiracy or money related, And some
I
of
think
us were
someone's
just
just
we're
still learning.
practicing, and hey,
Still learning.
we went low fat, high carb. Well, that was a disaster. Then we went super high fat protein. That didn't work great, but we're kind of back and forth. We're looking at plant based for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
We're
My thought
looking
is
at.
balance.
Then we started to learn about refined versus unrefined. Then we started to look at grass fed, which works great, except we can't feed the world on grass fed. But if you have the money and the opportunity, and because we have land in the U.S.,
Yeah.
getting more items that are traditional grass fed wild forage, it seems to bring health a little better in check.
Yeah.
So the more, but the one thing I say is the biggest thing you can do is if you cook as many of your meals as possible, you get to see what goes in there. So you know how much fat, how much salt, you get to pick and choose your ingredients. That alone is the biggest thing you can do. And because we don't cook a lot in the United States, some people cook no meals at all. And so if we would cook more, that would be the biggest. It wouldn't solve everything, but that would be the biggest, fastest way we could
and
help.
exercise more.
And exercise wouldn't. Yeah.
Yes, we're going to shut down here. Everybody's saying good night. It is getting late here on the East Coast, so on the eastern part of the U.S. For those of you guys out west, you can now get dinner. But
we made Cuban pork and black beans and rice because Jamie said. Jamie said, "Well, we met a little over a year ago." He goes, "Well, I'll come and help." And then he reiterated it with something. He's like, "Well, I'll come and help you, butcher." And I gotta when we were at Hootenanny. And he kind of halfway joked and said, "Well, you got to cook because, well, he's culinary trained also, but doesn't work in the field at this point." And so I thought, oh, well.
So what is he going to cook? Not chicken.
Well, so we decided we weren't cooking chicken. I was trying to decide what I wanted to do, and I kind of forgot. I knew he cooked some, but it's just like, what can I do in between my busy market day, and what's good and going to be fun and kind of festive. And so I decided to do a Cuban pork, which is a brine rub, roast or smoke, and then a mojo marinade, because I could do that on the smoker and fit it in the timing and set it up to brine a few days ago. And pork's very inexpensive also so I brine like 15 pounds of pork, got a lot extra, and then we did some beans, some traditional black beans and rice, and sort of a semi-Cuban dish.
And the beans were from a local farm.
Beans happen to be in the cupboard from a local farm that we like. So, but that was part of...
Which, by the way, has online ordering.
Yeah, they do.
So Shady Side Farms, if you look up Shady Side Farms, they have awesome
some of the best beans in the country, and they're organic certified. If you're
and some polenta too. Yeah, they do
cornmeal,
polenta, and beans, but their primary focus is
they do lamb and wool.
They do,
and they're all USDA certified.
They're kind of interesting because their primary focus is beans, and then they rotate with the corn instead of the corn and being the primary focus and rotating beans.
Well, and I think lamb might be almost primary to some of all that, but
yeah. No,
so it's a really nice family farm north of us.
Yeah.
So that was to, again, people are coming out to help us butcher. So we did a nice
so next year,
Cuban pork, beans, and rice.
Anybody's local and has chickens they want to butcher in the fall before the winter hits, we might have to do a bigger community butcher.
Well, that'd be fun to have another few people. We could handle really anything up to almost 100 chickens with extra people.
Yeah, with extra people.
And then we could do a potluck, and I could obviously do something. So that's for people that are within an hour or less of here that want to transport chickens.
Or want to learn how.
Yeah. Or just come and be a part of it and assist. They don't even have to bring chickens.
Yeah.
They can just help and we'll feed them.
Yep. Anyway, we really got to go. Yep. I'm going to say good night. We will see you next week with or without our normal forage food feature. I have a couple things on the list we could do, but I have no idea if I'll have time to put that together. Probably not.
We might have something. We'll be with Daryl Patton again, which we have videos from him. He's a U.S. renowned forager and writer and historian, and he's also he was a special ed teacher.
Yep.
So he worked with a lot of students and instruction, and so
he's a good teacher.
Yeah, so he's I'd say he's a pretty famous forager. So we'll be with him doing some stuff.
Yeah.
And he let us videotape last year. He says
the full foraging,
thing, no problem.
So we'll ask again this year, and we might be able to get that put together. But we will see you guys next week, 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time every Sunday.
That sounds interesting.
You can keep talking about food
I
if
know
you
I have to
want to.
think about that one, how we do that. I'm sure it would work.
Yeah. Anyway, have a good night, everybody. We will see you next week. Take care.
Good night.